final ambassador from Nordic countries, Her Excellency Leena-Kaisa Mikkola, good friend, ambassador from Finland to China, and of course she's appointed by the president of Finland to the ambassador to China, but also before that, you worked in the director as the Middle East and Africa in the department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also you also posted many positions in Brussels and Kampala, Athens, and Budapest. So also a veteran diplomat from Finland. So we'd like to hear from you, Ambassador Mikkola, please.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Henry, for inviting us. And it's very good to be here today with my Nordic colleagues, my Nordic friends, with whom, surprise, surprise, we share a huge amount of trust among ourselves. I will talk shortly about Finnish education system, and in particular of educational equality. And I think that I will concentrate on the Finnish system, but we already know after listening to my colleagues that the issue of equality is very important for all of us in every country's educational system also. So during the last years, my country has often been in headlines when it comes to quality education. According to many international surveys and studies, we have indeed done quite well in improving equal and quality education for all. But before highlighting the aspects of educational equality, let me start with a couple of words about history, background, and Finnish education system in general. In the end, I will also address the issue of vocational education, which I think is essential when building a society for all, society for equal opportunities. It is perhaps of interest for you to know that Finland was among the last countries in Europe to make education compulsory. We became independent from centuries of Swedish and then Russian rule in 1917. And the Act concerning general compulsory education came into force 1921. Schooling was common even before that, especially in the urban areas. However, in the countryside, where majority of Finns those days lived, schooling of children was less common. And this also relates to my own family background. My grandmother was born in a village in 1906. She never went to school. Anyhow, the Act from 1921 aimed to do away with the educational inequality between towns and countryside. And the idea of educational equality has remained one of the guiding principles in our education system ever since. Talking about equality, it consists of two dimensions, fairness and inclusion. Fairness means reducing the socio-economic barriers, while inclusion is to ensure basic standards of education to all. We don't live in a perfect world, and it would be hypocritical to claim that we or somebody else has achieved a complete equality through education. But while not perfect, I would say that Finland and other Nordic countries have done quite well. Finnish youth have universal and free access to education. Not students' gender or school's language of instructions explains very small part of the difference in skills during his or her educational path. Whether the student comes from the capital area or from the sparsely populated northern part of the country doesn't make a real difference when evaluating skills or academic achievements. The successes that we have had didn't happen overnight 102 years ago. It has taken many decades to achieve. There's been series of reforms and responses also to changing economic needs. But through trial and error, Finland has built its successes in education. Of course, broader societal factors have also been helpful. The overall commitment to equality that we have already mentioned, various welfare services, and the question of trust, the strong culture of trust. That has also always been fundamental when developing our road. So there's a kind of whole society approach, and what works for us might not be always 100% copy-pasted for others. However, there are some ideas free for copying. So let me briefly mention some. Firstly, the education for all approach has been a hallmark for Finnish education policy since its onset. There's been, and there still is, a broad political consensus to build a public school system that will serve every student without costs. As a result, every Finn has a subjective right to participate in quality schooling cost-free, from early childhood education all the way to obtaining a university diploma. The equality aspect is supported by investments, for example, in free school meals, free school rides, but also in investing in special education. The Finnish education system is in many ways, very flexible. We know that students' and pupils' preferences changed as they grow older. Education also needs to be able to respond to the fast-paced changes taking place in the labor market and the society. To allow for the necessary flexibility, there are no dead ends in our education system. The student entering and graduating a vocational school, for example, is still able to pursue later on university-level education. In recent years, efforts have been made to increase possibilities of personalizing studies, also already at the secondary education level, something that has been very much the case at the tertiary education. Coming back to the culture of trust. At the primary and secondary level, there are no ranking lists compiled at Finnish schools. The most important thing there is the system of trust based on the qualified and committed educational staff. Educational policy development is to a large degree headed by professional educationalists rather than politicians. Teaching is a sought-after career that people respect. Entry into that profession is quite hard. Often only 1 out of 10 applicants is accepted into teachers' training programs in the universities. But high standard of staff means also greater independence. The schools are able to supplement the national curriculum with locally important topics and independently decide how the teaching is carried out. And still a couple of words about vocational education and why. Because we think good quality vocational education is not only about equality in education, but also about equal opportunities in a society as a whole. The development of Finland's vocational education system has parts in our history. After the Second World War, Finland had to pay huge reparations to the Soviet Union. The reparations were basically paid in goods, machinery, and ships, which we didn't have. In order to have all those goods, machinery, and ships, we needed significantly adjust our industrial production, which meant that we also meant significant amount of skilled and qualified workers. And that was the stepping stone for our vocational education school and appreciation of them. Nowadays, it takes about 3 years to get a vocational degree. The training is to provide the necessary skills for working life. But not only that, the education also supports students' growth as individuals and responsible members of the society. It is characteristics to Finnish system that about half of the students choose vocational education as their secondary education. So to conclude, we Finns, as other Nordics we have heard, we're usually quite pragmatic and level-headed people. We're equally level-headed and realistic about the challenges and problems facing our education system. The picture is not always rosy, and one must admit that during the recent years, there have been regional differences in educational inequality have grown. Also, the skills between students and schools have grown somewhat. However, from an international perspective, the differences between schools and students are still quite moderate in Finland. But when seeing inequality, we take it very seriously. The equality in education mirrors very much the equality in the society as a whole, and also the social cohesion that we, for the 6th time now, the happiest country in the world, so much value. And one more thing on a personal note, which perhaps explain a bit the thinking of education in Finland. During one of my previous postings, an educational expert from that country asked my older son, who was 15 that time, so what's the difference between the international school that he attended that time and the Finnish school that he, before the international school, attended? So my 15-year-old son explained that in this international school, we prepare for academic excellence, but in my Finnish school, we prepared for life. Thank you.